Samaritan's Purse is an international, non-denominational, evangelical Christian disaster relief organization. Founded in 1970, it provides aid to people in need across the globe. Following the example of the Good Samaritan as found in the Bible, the organization provides assistance in crisis areas throughout the world. After a disaster, they help with immediate needs as well as long-term recovery assistance. This humble and dedicated group partners with local and state officials to get the right help in the right place. Today we are joined by Bruce Poss. Bruce is the Incident Response Manager for U.S. Disaster Relief at Samaritan's Purse. He discusses details about the organization's response and recovery efforts, as well as some of the international projects. Join me as Bruce shares some of the heartwarming stories that make Bruce and all of Samaritan's Purse weather heroes. This is Kevin Peterson. Welcome to Weather Heroes. Today we speak with Bruce Poss of Samaritan's Purse. Bruce is the Incident Response Manager for U.S. Disaster Relief. Welcome, Bruce.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. Glad to be with you.
So, Bruce, we've talked a little bit, but if you can explain to the audience, tell us a little bit about your background and your role, and how did you end up at Samaritan's Purse?
I have a background since '93 in disaster response, starting out as a volunteer with an organization soon after Hurricane Andrew hit Florida, and have been involved in some way with disaster response since then. And at one point around 2009, took a position with disaster relief organization, working nationally, doing trainings and organizing and coordinating disaster response for that organization. Worked there for 5 years. 2014, came to Samaritan's Purse, came as a program manager, which is the position that goes out and in the field and runs a disaster response location for Samaritan's Purse. And I did that for several years. In 2017, I was promoted, and Hurricane Harvey was my last response as a program manager. But now my role is to mainly keep up communications, as you could imagine, in a large organization with many people out in the field. The communications is a big part of it. And conference calls and Zoom calls and different things, coordinating with other organizations and within our people, our organization. So I take on a lot of those responsibilities to keep us moving. But I do still respond to the field and helping to mentor some of our staff. And presently I'm in Tyler, Temple, Texas. I'm mentoring a new staff member and came in and helped stand up a deployment here. And so that's kind of my present role.
Hey, sounds pretty busy, my friend.
It is.
Yeah, but there's a lot of reward in that, I think.
Yeah, I love what I do. When I interviewed for the position, I told our Vice President Luther Harrison, I said, "You're paying me to do something that I enjoy doing." And I really, sometimes it gets stressful. You're away from home a good bit. I have a wife that is very supportive, but it gets difficult. But the reward for me is to meet our volunteers, and this is out here on deployment is really. To me, that's where things are happening, and we wouldn't function well if we didn't have our volunteers, and so that's where they are. And to see them, many that I just a few minutes ago greeting, some that I've met before, so it's rewarding to meet these folks and then to see the impact they make in the communities that we serve.
So, Bruce, tell me about Samaritan's Purse. A little bit of a history. What are the goals of Samaritan's Purse?
So Samaritan's Purse was started in 1970 by a guy named Bob Pierce. Bob is also the guy who started World Vision, another large organization. So he started Samaritan's Purse that was mainly helping to fund other organizations, is what Bob was doing. And then in the mid-'70s, he asked Billy Graham if he could take Franklin Graham, his son, out to show him ministries that he was involved in around the world. And so Bob took Franklin under his arm a little bit and showed Franklin opportunities, things that he was doing around the world. And then Bob found out that he had leukemia. And so as he was progressing through that, he asked the board of Samaritan's Purse that at his death, that Franklin become the CEO. And they were out in Los Angeles at the time. And so Bob did pass away in 1978, and then the board voted to have Franklin become the president. Franklin's only ask was that they move the office from California to North Carolina, where his roots were, there in the western North Carolina mountains. And so that's how we got to Boone, North Carolina as our main office. And Franklin became the president. Both employees that they had at the time decided not to move with him. And so he moved to Boone, put the office in the upstairs of a doctor's office. He created a new staff there. Samaritan's Purse is an evangelical Christian organization that serves all around the world, over 100 countries that we serve in, mainly as a disaster response organization. From that time in the late 70s, it has just grown tremendously. In my 10 years, I've seen a lot of growth, but we respond to, as we like to say, based on the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke, in the scriptures, we like to serve people who are in the ditch of life and do that all over the world by going to natural disasters, war, all of those things. We do everything that we do to honor and glorify Christ, and the back of our truck says "Helping in Jesus' name," and I would say that's that's a great description. It's not just some cute slogan that somebody came up with. It's really what we're about. But we, have medical wings. We have water purification, all kinds of ways that we can help around the world. So it's really our purpose is it's a biblical mandate that we feel that we have to meet those people, as the Good Samaritan did the guy who had been robbed, to meet him in the ditch. And so that's what our focus is to help those folks.
No, that's really good. So Bruce, so as we look at the efforts of Good Samaritan, so you're talking they're international, they handle famine, war, all those things, but also here in the US they also take care of natural disasters. And I know that y'all do both the response piece as well as the rebuild or the longer term recovery. So talk to me about the response piece. What does that look like? And then maybe we kind of get into the rebuild.
So we have a fairly large staff that we always have someone assigned to watching the weather. We've developed relationships, of course, with emergency managers across the country, churches that have responded with us, some other folks that are involved in the weather watching business. And so we're watching for when events are happening. Of course, we're in tornado season now, and a lot of times those aren't announced events like hurricanes are. Hurricanes, you watch them come across the Atlantic or the Pacific, and we're ramping up for them. But so we're always watching the weather and preparing to respond. We have 8 large trucks that is our main vehicle for responding. That truck has all the supplies and equipment that we need to respond to do any of the work. Mainly what we're doing is cutting trees, tarping houses that have been damaged by wind. We respond to wildfires and sifting through the ashes. And then, of course, flooding is also what we respond to. So we're looking at disasters as they're happening. And when we feel like the local resources will be overwhelmed and won't be able to take care of it, then we'll talk to emergency management. We'll kind of get the ground truth of really what the damage is. And then we will send our staff there to put eyes on it and verify everything. And then a decision is made to deploy, to stand up a deployment in that location. And so when we stand up a deployment, we will send the disaster relief truck. We will we'll set up at a church, as we are here in Temple, and we kind of set up a camp and invite volunteers to come in. And we feed those volunteers 2 hot meals a day. We have shower trailers to provide them showers. They sleep in the church. We give them a safety briefing on some of the things, how it is to run a chainsaw or to mud out a house. We talk about those things and the safety issues so that they are covered there. And then we divide them up into teams and send them out with the equipment with a team lead that has had experience in what we're doing. And they go out. We solicit, ask, make it available to homeowners in the community that we can come and help. And we gather those requests and those needs, and then we put a team to that request, and we do that until we've met all those requests where people have asked us to come and help. We stay long term in a response. Thankfully, we're blessed that we can stay long term and not have to pull out and go back home. But we stay until every work order that we've collected is done. The ones that we have the ability to do. There are some requests that sometimes it's beyond what we can do, but we kind of focus then on what we do best. We don't do feeding of the public. We provide the food for our folks, but we kind of focused in on what we do best. And so that's kind of our quick glimpse of our response efforts. And we're always watching. Presently, we're in 6 locations across the country and doing those things, mainly tree response now from the recent tornadoes.
So, or looking at, like you said, the weather, and this has been a busy spring for sure. I'm thinking
Yes.
2011 type of busy spring, as I
Yeah.
look at it. But so as an area is being impacted and all those choices, you guys are assessing really probably on the weather reports. You're calling the local emergency folks and saying, can you handle it? And they say, well, we really could use you best, and you're deploying some folks out there. And then you have these 8 trucks. And where do you keep your 8 trucks?
So we've kind of spread those out. When I first came, we had 5. So those we keep 5 in North Carolina
Mhm.
in our facilities there. And with each of the large trucks, there's the showers and the kitchens that go with it. So it's a kind of a fleet
Wow.
of vehicles. So we keep
Yeah.
5 sets of vehicles there in North Carolina. We have an office in Coppell, Texas, right at DFW, Dallas Fort Worth Airport, just north of the airport there. And so we keep 2 sets of equipment there in Texas.
Okay.
And out on the West Coast, we have another center there, missions ministry center there, and we keep a set of equipment there on the West Coast, mainly responding to fires out there. But we keep staff in North Carolina and Texas.
Okay.
We don't have staff out on the West Coast.
Very strategically placed, my friend. Well done.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
is we those when a wildfire breaks out in California, you want to get there, and that's another thing that we try to get there as quickly as possible. When I think of disaster needs, as soon as that tornado has lifted and gone through, the needs are immediate. And if we're a week later coming in, we've missed some opportunities to help folks, and so we want to be there as quickly as we possibly can. And that's why we have the staff that we have. That's why we have the equipment that we have, is so that we can get there soon after the storm. We've done well with that. Here in Temple, the tornadoes came through on a Thursday night, and Saturday morning we were on the ground here. And so we're very, very quick in getting into those areas.
You've got these response operations all around. How many do you have right now?
Yeah, on the response side, we're active in 6 locations.
Okay.
We're Barnesdall, Oklahoma, Tallahassee, Florida, the flooding around Houston that happened a while back.
Okay.
Here in Temple, Texas, we just stood up in the last few days in Bentonville, Arkansas, and Claremore, Oklahoma. That just this week were hit by tornadoes.
So how many staff do you guys have to make all this happen?
In different capacities. We have, of course, people that work in our offices and not, non-deploying staff, but
Sure.
we're around 30 deploying staff. Our I guess it's more than that, really about 38 or 40. Typically on a disaster site, we have a program manager, we have an assistant program manager, and then we have what we call a driver mechanic who becomes the logistics person. He's the guy that brings in some of the equipment, drives the large truck in, and then they're the logistics person that as you use chainsaws, they have to be sharpened. As you always have in mechanical breakdowns. And so we have that person that is that. We were kind of, I think pretty efficient with staffing. That's not to say that sometimes we bring in others. Here we have a few extra staff because we have some people who are training. And that was kind of the purpose that I'm out, is to mentor our new staff and to help them. This person was just promoted from an assistant position to a program manager position. So we want to make sure that they're successful. So we do that. So that's kind of the staffing. And then back in the office, we have a team that's a volunteer coordination team, so that as volunteers inquire about deploying, they're helping to get them signed up, and we, to keep a good number of volunteers, overnight volunteers at our sites. Of course, we have people who deal with technology and those kind of things, ordering supplies and keeping us well stocked on the things that we need. So there's a lot of people that work in the background and not out on the site, but it takes a lot of people. We're over 100 when we talk of all those folks
Wow.
in U.S. disaster.
That'll keep you busy.
Yes, certainly.
So y'all
Certainly.
also do the what we were talking about, the recovery piece, the longer term things. I think you call them
Yes.
rebuilds. Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about that. How many do you have going, and that's also going to be very rewarding, helping people get that house back up.
Yeah, that's our vice president said, rebuild used to be something that was kind of a way to keep volunteers active between disasters. Of course, there doesn't seem to be any time that is between disasters now. It just seems to be ongoing, going, from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But we developed this rebuild program to go out, and not every place that we respond to a disaster do we do a rebuild, but we're able to go to do some repairs to houses, that some that maybe have been flooded, and when it's flooded you have to pull the sheetrock out, and so it's just simply replacing the sheetrock and maybe some electrical and things like that. But we've developed into beyond that to building houses from the ground up. Around the time of Hurricane Florence, we started looking at people who lived in mobile homes, and their mobile home was damaged. And so we have a mobile home replacement program where in areas we will just simply purchase a mobile home for someone and have it set on their property. But it really has grown tremendously. Hurricane Harvey, we started doing something where we purchased property in LaGrange, Texas, some acreage there. There was a mobile home park that had been flooded several times. I think it was about 5 times that they had flooding. And we decided, we need to get them away from that river where they're experiencing flooding over and over again. And so we bought property close into the city of LaGrange, put in roads and infrastructure, electrical and plumbing, the sewage and all of that. And we built 20 homes on that property that were where there's been tornadoes, especially. But we put in the center of these houses is a safe room that's built in. It functions as a bathroom every day, but the bathroom has a poured floor, block walls, and a poured ceiling and it has a rated door on it so that it will stand up to a pretty strong tornado. And so that's a neat thing that we've done. Presently, we're working in Mayfield, Kentucky, where everyone knows of the tornadoes that hit that area. And I've heard this the other night that they had more storms. But we're building a neighborhood there, maybe about 72 homes. When we finish, 60 of those homes are already complete. There are people living in the neighborhood already. I was there recently. Neat to see. You come around the curve right there on the edge of town, and you see this neighborhood. So you have people living in the neighborhood. You have houses that are in some part of the process of being built, and then you see foundations that are yet to be built on, and then you see blank lots. But we'll have 72 of those houses built probably by the fall, and
Wow.
just neat to see. The problem in Mayfield, there were a lot of renters, and the rental inventory was damaged, and so we were able to build this neighborhood. When we build for someone, we do, of course, our casework on their means to keep up the home and to insure the home, things like that. But when we turn over the home to them, it's free and clear. There's no mortgage for them. There's some stipulations about them not selling it and those kind of things, but it's neat to see. And then also in where we replace mobile homes, we want to give these people who have been traumatized by a disaster, we want to give them some sense of security. So like in Beauregard, Alabama, around Opelika, we did a lot of mobile home replacement there. But what we did was to put an in-ground tornado shelter that the families then could run to if a tornado came again. And so that's giving those people some sense in some way of avoiding damage, avoiding their threats to their life when it comes. And just I could imagine I'm thankful that I've never I've been in disaster work for a long time, but never had to go through a disaster as you were telling me that you had to. But I can just imagine that when the wind blows and thunderstorms are predicted, the anxiety level goes up. And so those storm shelters and those safe rooms within those houses gives them some sense of safety that they have a place to go to.
That is a heck of an effort and so giving. That is really good. Really great.
Yeah, we're completely donor driven, and I have to say, Evan, that it's our donors that make it possible. We stay away from taking government grants within Samaritan's First U.S. Disaster. We don't want any strings tied to our work, and so it's our donors that make all this possible. And it's neat to see, at the dedication of a house from our rebuild program. One of the parts of that is they're presented with an invoice. Your heating HVAC would cost this much. Your plumbing, your site preparation has a list of kind of looks like an invoice, but written across it in bright red letters is paid in full. And for us, that leads right into the gospel too.
Yeah.
But it's neat to see that we can gift that to a homeowner, to a family that has just, a lot of times these people, when disaster happens, they live months in a
Yeah.
hotel,
Oh yeah.
and it's just tough on them. And so for them to have a place that they can call their own, and it's neat to see that end of it. Me working so much on the response end of it. We know that when we leave an area, it's not done. They're just starting that process, and weeks, months, years after disaster, there's still need in those communities, and it's we tend to think about it. We live in a media driven world where when it's out of the news cycle, I mean, I would imagine most people don't think of Mayfield, Kentucky on a daily basis,
Yeah.
but
That's exactly.
it's
Yeah.
still there's still tremendous need there. If you go to Mayfield, there's still the downtown area. There's somebody was talking about the storm the other day, and doing damage. Well, there's not buildings there to damage anymore because their downtown area still you see the results of that. But we're in Mayfield, Kentucky. We're in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is the other side of the right there at Fort Campbell. We're doing a rebuild there. We're also over in eastern Kentucky in Breathitt County, which is one of the poorest counties in the nation. Breathitt and Knott County, pretty much doing the same thing as we've talked about. We've purchased some land in Breathitt County, and we're in with a group of nonprofits doing the work in Knott County. We're going to build, I think it's about 10 houses in that particular neighborhood, 20 over in Breathitt County. Breathitt County is one place that we've been twice. They had flooding just a few years apart. We had been there and responded to the flooding and done a little bit of mobile home replacement there in Breathitt County. And we had pulled our equipment out, and 10 days later, they had flood again. Just difficulty. The sad seeing that a really poor area be hit twice by flooding in just a few years apart.
What would you say has been the most challenging disaster that you've been involved with?
Oh man, that's a hard one, Given. That's a
Oh, it could be from
it's
the most devastating or the hardest to coordinate or
yeah.
whatever it might be.
I mean, everybody knows probably the benchmark of disasters was Katrina. I think there's a lot of things that came together for that. Of course, your own experience, Hurricane Andrew, very devastating. I guess to me, it's the ones where there's loss of life. We've had just recently a lot of folks who have lost their life in tornadoes. I think of the Beauregard, Alabama area. There was a lot of loss of life there, and that one would be a benchmark of for me. But they're all for. I try not to, especially if I go to a home here in Texas today and I'm talking to that homeowner, I don't want to belittle their damage as compared to someone else's. It's that person, that's probably the worst disaster they've ever been through. and hopefully the worst disaster they'll ever go through. And I don't want to say, well, I've been to this place and it was much worse, and you ought to feel better because you didn't have damage as bad as this other one. But Katrina was difficult. I was just seeing. We were riding through Texas here in Temple the other day and looking at the as if you've been out in disaster areas, the search and rescue comes by and they put an X on the front of the house, and they will put the known occupants of that home, and if there were any deaths in that home, and a lot of times they'll put if there were pets there. But what was telling to me in Katrina is those X's were not by the front door or on the front door. They were on the roof of those houses. So when search and rescue was coming by initially, they couldn't get to the front door. They were getting to the roof of that house. And then to see houses where people had evacuated up to the attic of their homes and then were trapped in the attic and had to fight their way out, had to, use tools that they maybe didn't take with them into the attic to try to get out of the attic to get rescued. And so that certainly is a high mark for me. I wasn't on the ground in Hurricane Andrew as you were, and you probably have some of those memories still of that time. But it was, I know from Hurricane Andrew, people telling me that people who lived there couldn't find their way around because street signs are gone and things like that. Of course, we know the Joplin, Missouri tornadoes with the school children that perished in that. So those, loss of life, we can replace homes. We, can clean up houses, but it's the loss of life. And that's, I think, just a word, and this, it's important to heed warnings. We were expecting some weather here overnight. And so with our group of volunteers, we're saying, if there's something that happens, here's the safe place to go. We want you to go into the stairwell and things like that. And so, people, a staff member here at the church, he had a raspy voice on Sunday here, and he said, this is because you shouldn't go out and try to take pictures of tornadoes. And so he wasn't smart. I would just, people need to be smart in that there's enough loss of life without, with people trying to heed warnings and not do those things. But, we sometimes think, we hear the warnings go off and we just ignore them. And so I would say, that's what cannot be replaced is somebody's life. And so those disasters where people have died is the ones to me that are the most tragic.
Bruce, tell me a bit about Samaritan Purse's international efforts.
So Samaritan's Purse works. We have offices in a lot of countries around the world. Just like here in the U.S., we were prepared to respond to disasters within the U.S. We're also prepared for disasters around the world. Presently, we're working down in Brazil that has had flooding a couple of weeks ago and still having ongoing flooding. Internationally, we respond with giving out tarps to people to cover their homes or to make new shelter. We have a water purification so that we can purify
So important.
drinking water. It has desalination. In the Bahamas was hit by the hurricane a few years ago, and our guys were drawing water out of the ocean and making pure drinking water out of that. Acapulco, Mexico was hit last year. It was a kind of a peculiar kind of storm. It was a tropical storm coming up the west coast of Central America. And just before coming on shore in Acapulco, ramped up to a Category 5 hurricane. And so we responded there with water purification, giving out hygiene kits and home water purification filters, but also purifying drinking water, that was available to the public. And then something that's more recent for us, Samaritan's Purse for a long time has had a medical wing to it. If you remember the Ebola crisis in Liberia, so Samaritan's Purse was working in Liberia. We have a 2-year post-residency program for doctors who are interested in medical missions, and we support hospitals in Kenya and different places. And so we send those doctors. So Samaritan's Purse has had medical folks around, for a long time. The Ebola crisis in Liberia was a part of that. We had sent Dr. Kent Brantley there back in the fall before that, and as a part of our 2-year post-residency program for doctors. And beginning of that year, he started seeing Ebola cases, and they wrapped up some protocols there for the clinic where he was working there. And then we found ourselves in the middle of this Ebola crisis, developing protocols. And I can remember we had an epidemiologist on staff at the time, and I can remember him speaking to us about the horrors of Ebola. And he was saying it was to an epidemic proportion, and no one was paying attention. And a few weeks after that, of course, everyone knows we had Dr. Brantley that contracted Ebola, and Nancy Wright-Bold that was working with another organization there with Dr. Brantley. And so we started treating Ebola, and that led right into later on our response to COVID. And so we've developed these field hospitals that we could deploy to disasters. We had one in Cremona, Italy. So the Ebola crisis, you can edit all that out. The Ebola crisis led us right into the same protocols that we were using for that. And so we set up in Cremona, Italy. We set up in, someone remember, a hospital set up in Central Park in New York. That was Samaritan's Purse. And so these field hospitals have become useful. After the hurricane in the Bahamas, their hospital was damaged. We were able to put a field hospital there. When the military was liberating Mosul from ISIS, the UN had asked a trauma hospital to be set up there. And so 16 miles from Mosul during that liberation, there was a Samaritan's Purse field hospital doing surgeries and treating mainly women and children who were injured because ISIS was setting traps and things. And so these field hospitals on the international side have really been a tremendous asset. We have doctors and nurses and other medical staff that stand ready to respond to anything like that. And so we've ramped up to be able to do multiple hospitals around, wherever they're needed. And of course, the non-medical stuff that we respond to help with, just the basic needs of folks around the world. So we also have something called Children's Heart Project for children who are born without the separation between the sides of their heart. And we do those here in the U.S. and down in the Cayman Islands and in South Korea. So it's a large organization, Kevin, that is able to help a lot of people around the world. And I'm just privileged to be a part of that in my small way.
So, Bruce, your final thoughts, sir, anything that you'd like to share with us regarding the Samaritan's Purse or anything else around your disaster experience?
I would just say, as you and I talked about your experiences in Hurricane Andrew, we need to, and we talked a little bit about during this, we need to remember these individuals and communities for the years to come after a disaster. When we pull out of an area, we understand that there's still need there. One of the reasons we want to partner with local churches in those areas is that we know that there are ongoing needs, and churches can respond to those needs and be a place of hope and help to those folks. And so, we have to just remember these communities, not just right after the disaster happens, but the hope of Christ is certainly what we share with people. And it's not just a one-time event. A tornado comes through in a matter of seconds. A hurricane may take, a few hours to blow through and leaves a path of destruction. But that destruction and that scar on that community is ongoing, just like, scars that I have from events in my life. Those communities have scars, and we tend to not remember them a long time after those events. And so I would say that's my main thing is just to continue to remember these folks. And if you have the opportunity to get out and help in a disaster, by all means do so. You will get more from helping than you could ever imagine. And they will never forget what you did.
Well said, sir. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu. Thank you again, Bruce, for joining Weather Heroes today and for telling us about the many blessings of Samaritan's Purse.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin.